Hello class, this is your instructor James, and I wanted to make this video to help you successfully complete part 2 of the Service Learning project. You'll need to download the assignment from our D2L course. You'll also want to be logged in to the MyPlate Food Tracker program with your nutrients report for your volunteer open, because you'll need that in order to answer some of the questions for this assignment. Now, the first couple questions deal with content that we will cover in Chapter 7 before the assignment is due. You will need to calculate the volunteer's BMI based on their height and weight, and then you need to discuss their calorie intake. I'm not going to go through every single question, but I'll go through some of the ones I think that would be helpful for you. And then if you have any questions after watching this video, you can always email me or catch me in class. So for this first question where it says, what was your volunteer's average eaten for total calories and recommended target, we're going to want to refer back to our nutrients report. And you can do that with your the reports that you originally submitted. So I'm going to pull mine up. I'm going to actually pull up the program online to show you exactly what I'm asking for here. You do want to make sure you're using your volunteer's profile, and then make sure you've entered the first day that they recorded and the last day. We want to have a minimum of 3 days, but some of your volunteers may have recorded more. So again, just make sure that you've entered in the first day through the last day. Click on Create Report, and then the program will do all the calculations for you. There's no multiplication or division that you need to do. The program will automatically generate an average of those days. So the question is asking for the target calories, which was 2,000, and the average eaten, which was 2114. So we'd go back here, enter those values in. The next question is how many calories were they under or over? So just doing some quick simple math, they were over by 114 calories. And then lastly, if this intake were to continue, what would you predict would happen to your volunteer's weight? Well, we know that if they were continuously over on their calories consumed, that it would cause weight gain, in this case, slow weight gain. The next few sections ask you to assess your volunteer's macronutrients, and each section is pretty similar. You need to enter their average eaten for that macronutrient. For this question, we just did this in class. Calculate your volunteer's RDA for protein based on their body weight. You know that you have to convert their weight in pounds to kilograms first before you do that, and please do show your calculations here. Jumping down to question number 4, list the 3 foods that provided the most protein. Now, you won't be able to do this with your printed reports. You need to do this within the program. So we'll jump back to the program. There's a little plus sign next to protein, so I'm going to click on that. There will be a slight pause as the program does its thinking and calculations. And here we can see the top 3 foods for this volunteer was a fried chicken sandwich, pistachios, and chicken nuggets. The respective percentages were 25, 17, and 16%. So we'd come back to the assignment and we would list those 3 foods with those percentages. And then each one of these sections ends with a similar question. Based on the responses and the reports, you need to come up with you need to list and fully explain 3 specific changes in foods, not food groups, that would improve your volunteer's intake of this specific nutrient. And then you need to, from there, fully explain the effects these changes will have on their nutrient intake. So as you can see, I'm looking for specifics here. You can't just say they need to eat less red meat, or they need to whatever. It has to be very specific with their changes. And that's going to be true for the next section on carbohydrates, as well as the next section on fat. I do want to point out that there is a discrepancy between the program and the American Heart Association's recommendations. So there's this question, how much saturated fat is recommended by the American Heart Association? That information is in our textbook. We also talked about it in class. When you look at the program, though, for saturated fat, it tells you that the recommendation is less than 10%. That is not the correct answer. For whatever reason, the program does not have the American Heart Association's recommendations, so you need to put that American Heart Association recommendation here as your response. Let's see, moving down, you'll get to this table. We won't have covered these nutrients before the assignment is due, which is okay. I'm just asking for you to record their target, average eaten, and status. So if we look at, for example, vitamin A, we'd come over to the program. We'd see that the target was 900. The average eaten was 121, and the status was under. So pretty simple. You'll just go and record that information from the reports, and then you'll do something similar, except this time you'll be using the food groups and calories report, comparing the target, average eaten, and status for some selected food groups. The assignment finishes with you writing a summary, identifying some good food choices your volunteer made, and then some changes they need to make. So those are 3 separate and distinct sections or parts to this final section of the project. So first you need to write a paragraph, a summary of their intake compared to the target. What I want you to do is look at their food choices that they made on this particular day, and then explain how those choices led to intakes of nutrients and or food groups that were under or over. So for example, if you look at their 3 or more days of food intake and they didn't eat any fruit whatsoever, that would be something that you'd want to identify, and then possibly that led to a low value or under value for things like fiber or vitamin C. If they ate a lot of butter and red meat and processed meats, that could have led to an over for saturated fat, which on this particular day, the intake was 11%. It was almost double the American Heart Association recommendation, so we want to go and examine what caused that to occur. And in this case, it was a lot of fast foods that led to that, as well as a whole milk yogurt. Okay, so once you've done that, one other thing is do not list any changes that you recommend to their diet in this section. This should purely just be some examination and reflection of what they did on these 3 days. The next thing that you'll do is identify some choices that they made that led to healthy nutrients. So we'd go back to what they consumed. A good healthy nutrient would be something like fiber. We'd click on that. Program does some thinking, and we see that oatmeal was the best source of fiber, followed by pistachios and blueberry. So here we would say that my volunteer consumed oatmeal, which led to their fiber intake. It's very important that you connect the food with the nutrient. We can go back, and in this case we don't need to have we don't need to necessarily list multiple foods. We can look at potassium, and we can see that pistachios contributed to this person's potassium intake. The focus again should be on healthy foods. We can look at we can even look at nutrients that have an under status and choose those. We can look at vitamin C, and the top food for vitamin C actually was the hash browns, curiously enough, but it does come from potatoes, and that was followed closely by blueberries. So the key here is that you're connecting foods with nutrients. And then lastly, we want to recommend some specific and measurable changes that we want our volunteer to make, which would ultimately improve the nutritional quality of their diet. The focus, again, is that connection between the specific food and the specific nutrients. Just a special note here, you don't want to recommend that your volunteer increase their intake of added sugar, sodium, saturated fat, or cholesterol. So focus on vitamins, focus on minerals, focus on fiber. Those are all focus on monounsaturated fat. Those are all appropriate nutrients that we would want our volunteer to increase. Again, the important thing is that you're very specific. So if you just make a very broad general statement like eat more fruits and vegetables, that's not going to be specific enough. I want you to name specific fruits and the specific nutrients they provide. Okay, well that wraps up the video for part 2 of the Service Learning Project. If you have any questions, again, after watching this video, please catch me in class or send me an email. And thank you for your time.